Evening, everybody. My name's E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're gathered tonight to celebrate this beautiful book, The Last Nomad, Coming of Age in the Somali Deserts. We are joined by the Refugee Women's Network. The Refugee Women's Network inspires and equips refugee and immigrant women to become leaders in their homes, businesses, and communities. We have been longtime friends and partners of the Refugee Women's Network, so we are really, really honored. We've gotten to sell things that some of the participants of the Refugee Women's Network have made. It has been a real special force in our community, so it's really great to get to have y'all be a part of this tonight, and it's just so perfect for this book. So first, I'm going to introduce our conversation partner, Samuel Kolawi. His novel is The Road to Salt Sea, and it is forthcoming from Amistad HarperCollins. Samuel was born and raised in Ibadan, Nigeria. His work has appeared in Agni, Gulf Coast, Washington Square Review, Consequence, and is forthcoming from Harvard Review. And he teaches at Georgia State University, I just found out. So he is a honorary Atlantan for the time being. We're very honored to have him here, and we're excited about his forthcoming novel. And the woman of the hour is Shugri Said Salh, who was born in the desert of Somalia in 1974 and spent her early years living as a nomad. In 1992, she immigrated to North America after the Civil War broke out in her home country. She attended nursing school at Pacific Union College and graduated with honors. And although this is her first book, Shugri has been storytelling since she could talk. From her grandmother and the nomadic community in which she was raised, she heard stories and learned of their power to entertain, teach, and transform. When she isn't writing or telling stories, she works as an infusion nurse. She lives in Sonoma County with her husband and 3 children. So we're thrilled to have both of you here, and everybody watching at home, we're happy for you to ask questions if you want. You can put them in the chat or in the ask a question box, and we know you're going to want to go home with this beautiful book. So just know that you can click the teal button at the bottom center of your screen, and that will take you directly to how you can buy the book from Karis. So I'm going to hurry up and get out of the way and let Samuel take it from here, but thrilled to have you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ER.
Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Samuel Kolawole, and I'm so excited to be here to be talking about this book with Shugri. Shugri, thank you for writing this book. Really.
Oh, thank you.
I would like to appreciate the Refugees Women's Network, Karis Books, Algonquin, all the partners of this wonderful event. It's a really great opportunity for me to be having, to have this conversation today. The Last Nomad.
Yes.
So this is I'm thinking we should kick off by just listening to you read from an excerpt from your work. We want to kind of bask in the radiance of your beautiful words. So
yeah. Oh, finally, but today especially, my voice is really gone, and I'm like I can hardly say a word. But I really want to take the time and say thank you to you, Samuel, to ER who just left us, and for the Refugee Women's group, and also Karis book. That I'm so grateful to be doing this, and I want to tell to our listeners or anybody who is out there, it's a drought. So make sure you buy books and help out. It's a lot of the bookstores, especially smaller bookstores, their way of recruiting income is not easy anymore because of the pandemics, because often I will go into a bookstore and buy it. So that's not happening. So thank you so much. Let me see. I'm going to just read little passage from the prologue, the starting, and then come to a natural ending, because the prologue itself is a bit longer than I would like to. So let's see. Thank you. Okay. First, I wanted to show everybody that every chapter starts with Somali prologue, with the exception of the. Oops, that's not gonna happen. Yeah, there we go. So, with the exception of my, what do you call it? The prologue, it starts. So, let's see. Prologue. I am the last nomad. How can I be the last one? Nomads still exist in that faraway desert where I grew up. So, how can I make such a bold statement? What I'm really trying to say is, I am the last person in my direct line to have once lived like that. And now I feel like the sole keeper of my family stories. As I sit here in my home in California, weaving my tale for you, the weight of that responsibility urges me on. All of my ancestors, both sides of my family, were nomads. They traveled in the East African desert in search of a grazing land for their livestock and the most precious resource of all, water. When they exhausted the land and the clouds disappeared from the horizon, their accumulated ancestral knowledge told them where to move next, find a greener pastures. They loaded their hats and belonging into the most obedient camels and herded their livestock to a new home. My nomadic family was at the mercy of the weather. At the end of July, the long dry season, when the clouds finally rumble with rain, we look up the sky with renewed hope. As the desert quenched its thirsty, the red earth crackled back to life. Responsibilities is adults welcome the rain with drums, singing, and dancing. Children get fat and healthy, sitting around the fire at night. They soak the folktale and poem passed down from generation to generation. But despite the renewed abundance of food, we knew we had to preserve some of it for the dry season to follow. Sometimes drought hit harder than usual, killing both livestock and people. Bones and twigs soon littered the train where the goats, sheep once happily, where goats and sheep once happily grazed. In those times, my ancestors ceased singing under the moon. Their drums hardened, and they longed for good news. Children no longer heard stories by the fire, and an old poet will bellow to the desert, voicing his agony. He will speak of a dying land, taking his precious camels. His mournful poem will travel through time, across borders, to remedy the pain of his people for years to come. My three children, raised in California, know nothing of the nomadic life except from the stories I have shared. As I sit here now in my comfortable suburban home, listening to my teenage son excitedly tell me about his favorite YouTuber, I am reminded acutely of the void between my past and my present. I speak of a world of which he has little understanding. And an old African proverb says, when an elder dies, a library is burned. I'm not yet an elder, but I do feel a portal between two worlds. I am the last person in my immediate family who holds this particular library of knowledge. As the years pass, the sense of urgency I feel about sharing my experience with my children and the world grows. In my imagination, I have shared my story with each of you many times as we gather under a clear black sky. It is shiny stars guiding my ancestral wisdom. I have imagined you leaning into me as if I had brought the news of water after a drought. I have poured us more tea, for I knew it was going to be a long night under the luminous moon. I want to get this tale of mine right. The fire between us has crackled with excitement, as if to nudge my story along. But it's no longer enough for me to just imagine telling you my story. I feel the need to bring you all by the fire and into my world.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you very much. I really love this book, and one of the reasons why I love this book is because of its beautiful storytelling. The storytelling is so well done, but
Oh,
also because it's very very important. What we know we don't know a lot about what we know about your part of the world. is what is filtered through what we get from the Western media. And I think this book does a good job of digging deep, cutting through all of that, and telling us that story in a very, very authentic way. I'm always a big believer in telling our own stories as Africans.
Yes.
And that's what this book has done beautifully well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for gifting us with this book. And I have so many questions to ask. So many. Some of those questions we've already talked about them.
Yeah.
And let's start with the first one, which is and you kind of touched, in your reading, kind of touched on some of the things I'm about to ask. Why the Last Nomad? Why did you choose that title?
Thank you first. That's a beautiful question. Thanks for asking. The answer to that question is actually more complex, but to make it simple, honestly, I am the last of my line of lineage for my children who live in California. I'm not going to go back to the deserts of Somalia, right? These are kids who are roller skating, riding their bikes. This is their world. They are my Californian kids, right? And I am somewhat Californian myself too. So it is like, even as I don't know, a lot of I want to be respectful for all the audience, for I know you did not all read, but for most of even as you read in the book, even in my immediate family, right? Like I'm talking about my sibling, right? I was the only child who was given away as a gift of labor to that nomadic world. And as I've talked about in the book, my father was a teacher, a very literate, educated man who actually wants to educate his daughter in a time when that was not favored, right? And here was my young nomadic desert flower mother who was very adamant about giving her mother a helper. And the lucky of the draw, I was born as my mother is first daughter, and she gave me. So I am the last daughter for my line of lineage, for my family. That is what it meant to say. And as I explained in the first passage, so that confusion.
So you are the last nomad in your family.
And there is a lot of like nomads, Samuel. It's really because of the drought and all of the climate change. There's not a lot of them existing, right? I mean, it's hard. Desert is a really very hard place to live, right? Droughts hit anytime, waters disappear, wild animals attack you. So that's a kind of life. It's not easy. So my people can survive a lot, but as you know, water is essential. So if that prolongs, death is at some point.
Yeah, and with climate change, it's becoming difficult now for animals to get water.
It is really tough time.
So we are going to talk about your family later, your father, your grandmother, but before that, I just want us to talk a bit about your process. How was it like putting this book together? Just share with us what you can, what you can say, so for the benefit of those, for the benefit of the aspiring writers out there, in the audience, what was it like putting this book together?
Let's just say, it's like taming an untamed camel, right? A wild, headstrong camel. Come here, I need to ride you. Come here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really, it was. I often tell people, by training, I'm a nurse, right? I love science. I am one of those people who easily get high marks in chemistry, right? Math was not bad for me. I did well in math. You ask me to write, and you will bring me to tears, literally, oh. But the beauty of it, and it was quite a process. I started this way. Oh no, delete this. It's like I'm better now, but it just took what the heck? Like, I am writing a book that, like, I've never written a book. What am I doing? I'm not even writing an essay. I was crying about an essay. Now I'm like, I'm going to write a book. And that shows the determination I had for just telling this story of unique story of mine. But it was, like I said, it was really hard. But you know, the beauty of it is, I'm first of all an avid reader. Like, these all books that are lined up, I'm reading them. Like, I'm always reading books. So which is what and because Samuel, I come from a long line of oral tradition, poets. So all of those are telling children stories. And from early on, I learned how to tell stories. So really, that is all helpful. Let children talk, let them tell their stories. I was always telling my children my stories, so it doesn't die with me before it even come to you. So yeah, the process of going from oral to written was not easy. However, you know, it's like when you start a new job. I don't know if that's as simple as and it is very overwhelming. Like, I remember when I was a new nurse, everything felt very overwhelming, and soon it felt comfortable. And so subsequently, I would like to think I will be more comfortable, yeah. But it was quite a process, but a doable one too, if I may give you hope, and a one that you should never give, because in the end, there are a lot of helpers. There were a village of women who are willing to read my things and give me help and helpful hint, and I have to get over my ego.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's good that you talked about oral storytelling. As you know, we both come from cultures where, you know, the oral tradition is very, very important.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
important. And then there was this quote about when an elder dies, a library is born. You know, so that's a really, really powerful quote. And you know, in your book, I was able to identify how oral storytelling, you know, was used in your book, and I was able to identify about 4 ways in which it was used. The first is that it was used to pass knowledge from an history down from one generation to the next.
Yeah.
That was how it was used. And the second, it was also used as a form of entertainment.
Yeah, and that is how we pass wisdoms, knowledge, all of that, right? Because as a child, like I said, I heard a lot of stories, you know.
Yeah. So and with that entertainment came what I call moral instructions. So we tell kids a story to make sure that they do something, or to scare them from doing something. You know. And then the fourth is just as a survival mechanism, really. Tell us a bit about how you know this oral tradition, the oral storytelling form of storytelling, has helped really helped you then and still helps you now, and how it feeds into your book.
Yeah, I mean, that was the only reason I said perhaps I can do this book, right? Because in the end, like I said, English was a language that I find it actually very hard grammatically. I was like, oh my God, this is like I said, that untamed camel and you expect me. But like you say, honestly, that deep poetry, that deep language, the wisdom that installed in me, and I continued that too. When my children were young, I sang to them this baby songs, you know, that were really about making yogurt in Somalis, or you know what I mean, like so my children heard me, and as they got older and I actually wanted to impart some message or tell them something, I will actually make up stories that are some from my own childhood, but some I'll make up and tell them to. So even if I remember sometimes one of a kid was bullying my daughter, and to install some bravery and how to talk and stand up, because my oldest was quiet. I use that. So it's just the reason actually that I felt like perhaps I can write this book, because I have all of this oral traditions and I'm still a reader, and it felt overwhelming, but believing your ability to do that and knowing that was one of the reasons I helped me to impact.
Yeah.
So definitely oral tradition is a big thing, and it really left me that confident and perhaps even resilience to say I can survive all of, to really take, I mean, you're constantly fixing things, mistakes, and sometimes you can talk like that, but other times what was clear in the head is in the word form. Like, what was I trying to say? Like,
Yeah.
so it's quite a process, and I have gained quite a respect for all these amazing writers.
It's interesting because sometimes I find the English language very, very restrictive and all of that, and
Yeah.
there's the translation that happens in your head. That you I asked myself, there was a time I asked myself, what is the language of your dreams? And I realized that I do not dream in English. No, I do not.
Yeah.
What is the language of your thoughts? I do not think in English, but because of education, because English is the colonial language that has been handed over to us, I can do that kind of translation in my head on do that on the page. But I always find the English language very restrictive because there are things that you cannot really interpret. There are words you can't find. There are Yoruba words, for example, that you can find English interpretations for. English is not just enough to be able to contain.
I know what you mean.
Is that did you also find that in your own language, and how did that affect writing?
It's kind of interesting. I'm trying to write a thought so I don't forget. I actually find it, as I wrote in the book, I was one of those people who have nightmares as the result of the war, right? And my husband, he's from Ethiopia. My husband is from Ethiopia, and when we first met, he said I had nightmares, or he could hear me speaking Somali or whatever fit I was having in Somalia, right? And then as time passed, he said I was doing English because the two of us have to communicate in English. And I was thinking about the other day when you asked me this question, I was like, wow, that's interesting. The thought, what do I think? And I know there are a lot of Somali words like that are easier, that are kind of encompasses or catches it what the complex structure sentence I'm going to say. Yeah. For example, the word dumal, which means the act of, a nomad is when, like my grandmother, she lost my grandfather to one of the wars, and she has to marry his brother. That's just a way to keep wealth and things that they did. That was their tradition. And the word dumal explains. If I say dumal, everybody knows in Somali what I'm talking about. Yet in English, I find myself extrapolating all of this big word and then deciphering more. And can you infer that from all of that? And so when I was when I was writing the book, it actually, you can tell when the sun went home, when the night blankets us with its darkness, when the sun fell, all of those, if I try lean on what it means, perhaps those are something deeply ingrained into my body that only comes out when I'm writing. And it's funny, you're right, there are words that are coming. When I say, when the old man bellow into the, that is a Somali way of talking. And it's actually a poetic way. And that, again, comes from that long line of poetry, coming from being a nomad, certain way. So I have a way of seeing English language, even I find the ones that satisfy the most to me is, I went today in search of all English letter writing. When people, this was like maybe 1400, and I love this left letters people exchange, and I've been searching them for a while. I get it something close to it, but I didn't get what I wanted. But do you see me? I'm searching. Even when I look at language, there are things I find it fascinating, like poetry of that language. I feel like often even English poems speak to me more than words. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can spend the entire night, evening talking about language and how that works. But let's talk a bit um, about journeys and movements. Now this story is about movements, forced movements.
I'm a nomad. Yes.
Yeah, being a nomad itself is about movement, and when you were very young, you had to move. You moved a lot. You moved back and forth between the desert and the city. You know, after the war broke out, you moved a lot from one camp, to the next and all of that, and then you moved to Kenya, and then you moved to Canada, and then to the United States. Now,
California.
California. Yeah. So movements and journeys, and
I'm constantly moving. Yeah.
Yeah. So how has that really shaped the woman and the writer that you have become?
Well, for movement, I think the ability to always move, and like what comes to mind to me is adaptation, right? Ability to adapt. And so what are the nomads doing? Whenever they move to a new place, they are adapting to a new environment. One example may be if you move from one area, perhaps your enemy was a fox in that area, but then you moved to another area, your new enemy, your neighbor is a lion and hyenas, right? And so what are you doing? You're adapting, and you're like trying to find your grazing land where the water hole is, all of that. So survival, adaptation, and all of these places I moved around, it was always like that ability to adapt in the desert, right? And to overcome things like I said, I've been bitten by scorpions, snakes, chased by an angry warhog. All of that gives it's ingrained in me is this deep resilience that comes from the foremothers that my grandmother, right? So that is what comes to mind. And some of the migration or movement were necessary one, right? I'm running away from a war, stuck in the borders of Canada, and desperate to enter. Speaking of a refugee, right? This is something we can actually talk about. It's the most desperate feeling to know that you're in a border of a country and you're running from enemy and wild animals alike, and the country you have arrived said, we're not letting you in. And so those were all necessary one. And then Canada took me finally as a refugee. The only place that I moved because I have to, because it was like, maybe just because there was no urgency or need for it, was here when I was a young mother, and my husband, who's a software engineer, my handsome Ethiopian nerd, we moved here, and let's hope he doesn't hear us. What did you say? Peace. No, anyways, you know what I mean? So this was like, this was the only time coming here we said, oh, California looks good. And perhaps it's easier on my desert bone. It's not freezing like Ottawa in Canada. Yeah. Fantastic. Like many Somalis are in Minnesota, and everybody's asking, what are Somalis doing in Minnesota all the time? Yeah. It has nothing to do with the snow or the desert. It has everything to do with the connection among Somalis, right? Like somebody say, Ali is over there living in Minnesota, and Asha is coming. I'm bringing all my camels. I'm coming for you. She's going to stay with him, and then more connections. So I hope that answers your questions well.
Yeah, fantastic. So you learn how to survive, how to adapt, and all of that. There's a passage that I want to briefly read. That
if I can find it, just tell me the page.
No, it's in. You know where it is? It's in chapter 6. It's where you got to families for children. Yeah.
Families for children.
Yes. Yeah. FFC. That's the first paragraph. I'm just going to read the first 3 lines, and I'm going to because it was really fascinating. Now it says, as I got older, I became more curious about the world outside our families for children walls. The moment I had stepped within those walls, and could no longer wander freely, my nomadic soul had begun eroding. Now, before that time, you had, had some level of freedom. You had moved around a bit, as a nomad and all of that. But here, you found yourself really, really, you found, in this very restricted space. Talk to us about that.
I think, let me just say, the hardest chapter to write was the orphanage chapter, right? That was a really, is that the chapter we're talking about? Are we talking about?
Yes, exactly. That's
that was a really, really hard chapter to write. I remember my one night, I'm in the middle of my bed, computers right here, I'm typing away, and I'm just paper surrounding me, and I'm just like sobbing. My family, not like just strange behavior by mom, all come down and say, what is going on? I couldn't even talk. So because that chapter really I think points out vulnerability, right? Here I was, my children still like, I'm one of those moms who let them stay with me. If they at night, even when they're 13, I'm having a bad night, when they get sick, I take them to bed as if hugging them can get better. I think maybe because it was seeing them how much loss it was for me, vulnerable. I felt very vulnerable, and perhaps it was a cathartic thing to write it up to write, and it was very helpful. And in the end, healing followed. Not gonna say everything's fine, but it was very helpful. So you were asking me what I find arriving in that place was I was really bewildered. No one told me what was happening. And there was this longing. I don't know if there's this early on in the chapter, I kept going, trying to get out of this. You know what I mean? It was like a huge gated.
Oh yeah, you got out a couple of times, I think.
Yeah, I tried. I kept going, and the guards, it was guarded. It wasn't a mill. These were guards watching us, and they were not kind to us, and they just throw you a stick like a stray dog I described earlier. But I think what it was is I felt like in one of the passage I said, sentence I said in Somali is "Wansi araba ya iga soo daba araba." That is such a big word for a little 9-year-old girl to utter, and what it meant is I'm gonna journey out of here. You may journey out after me, meaning it's after a long day of life or hurting or maybe getting something from the city, you're heading home to your nomadic home, and there's a longing and sadness that follows until you know you're heading to your home, and you get happy when you get there, but in between it's not safe. So there's even like a tint of meaning that says I'm not even sure if I'm gonna make it, but that. And that was really very pinning. I felt I was pinned. I felt like I couldn't I felt like I was being watched. I felt everything was being prescribed to me. Do this, get up this. And what happened, as you would see, is what just finally I'm like, okay, I'm going to do all that I do to let this nomadic soul be free again. And I think people are going to have to read the story to really see the rest of it. But it was beautiful. Yeah.
I don't want us to give too much. Very quickly, our time is fast spent. And talk to us about your grandmother, Ayeyo. So you have this very interesting family dynamics where you have your mother who gifted you to your grandmother, and then you have your father who is really a very complicated character.
Sure.
Who values education and knowledge, and then but you have this grandmother who is this towering figure, who is this giant feminist in the midst of this kind of world where
in their own rights.
In the midst of this world where people don't really regard in a culture where women are not really regarded in that sense. How just talk to us. She's my favorite character, by the way.
Thank you, Samuel. Let me just say, if it's hard, women are still here in this country, fighting for the right to even get paid the same as men, or just even something close, right? We're still fighting after 100 years later. If in America we're still fighting that. Imagine in the desert, right? It's kind of like, I often say, everything's more extreme. Even our Me Too movement is more extreme. Rape, what? Nobody raped you, kind of thing. So here was my grandmother, actually, who I come to even have. The more I learn about her, I am like speechless. I don't think I have even the word to describe this grandmother of mine. My grandmother was a poet, and so a lot of the people, her name is Halima Hirsibile. Her poet artistic name is Hadia Hargali. Never heard in my life Somalis having an artistic name, a poet name. So she was like the original rapper, right? Like she herself. I'm like, what? So when she wanted to insult other people and they don't want to, she gives them that, their artistic name, right? Like that is her persona. She takes another persona on her. So she is my grandmother, who I learned was, as I was writing this book, she was also a camel tamer. I mean, if you think taming a horse is hard, try to tame a heart is strong. Head is strong camel. They bite. They are nasty. You name it, right? And she was constant. She was a camel herder. Again, another job that is not camel. So, and there are people know of my grandmother is poetry, but they don't necessarily know who she is. Like the other day, I was telling somebody about her poem, and she was like, "Wow, I heard that poem. I did not know who it belonged." I said, "That is actually my grandmother's poem." So my grandmother was the original activist, right? And I come to realize in that time, what she was doing is today really something. She is a woman who's really fighting for the right of everything. In her time, right? In her era, she have done something. She has done something that was amazing, right? And I should say she had done, because she's not alive anymore. So she was really amazing. I don't know. There is a story I wanted to tell you, but it depends on if you have more time. Maybe it requires 3 more minutes, and I'm happy to tell you. Sure. Is it okay? This is a story. Someone asked me, one of people who were interviewing me asked me a question about my grandmother, her early poems and things like that. And I went in search of the poems. So for one, to write it down in full, because there's a fragment of here and there. And what I learned was in the desert, when my grandmother was 12, was when she told her first poem. More like, think of a poetry charm where all the youngsters, after they heard it in the desert, these are people who live in huts, who live in the desert, like we've been talking about, grazing and water and all that. So when the youngsters wanted to, after they heard, put the goats or the camel into the fence and then enclosures and then milk them, they socialize. So they will kind of find a place where they can gather safely among them. These are man and woman, and they will be like dissing each other, like through their point. They would probably be insulting each other's clans, all of that they used to do. So here I heard my grandmother heard that 2 clans, sub-clans were insulting, and my grandmother's sub-clan lost. And when she heard at Tualif, she became indignant and went there that night, snuck out the second night. And this is her first, that's when she said her second poem, her first poem. While everybody is standing, you have to create these poems, and then somebody would say something to you and you answer them. You can't even say, you have to like quick tongue and just utter it. And that is, I'm like, oh, I can't even finish sentence. But that was my grandmother, amazing woman who at 2 Alif will say the poem that will get her very famous in literally all of that nomadic land. So, and they would say, I remember the lady told the story of of how my sister told a story of how two men who have been herding, two men who were her tribe, they've been herding camel for 2 years, meaning the camels are not like goats. You don't just herd them during the morning, during the day, and come home. Sometimes camel herders are very sufficient, independent, and they could come back weeks later, months later, some of them years later. So by the time her poem became famous, two men from her subclan had arrived in to another area, and they said, "Announce yourself. Who are you?" And so, what do you say? You say your name and you say your subclans, and hope that this new subclans doesn't have your head, you know. And what's interesting is, can you hear me, Samuel?
Yes, I can.
What is interesting is when they told the man who they were, they said, "Oh, you guys are Hadi Oga Hardali is man." And so this guy's like, "Hadi Hardali, you are telling us we belong to this woman's tribe." And they were kind of like indignant about it, because for one, their name has been a woman's name come above them, and then the only reason they're gonna have this peace or maybe recognize is because of my grandmother. They recognize, you know, and so they will eventually get home and realize it was their 12-year-old, you know, relative that is people are recognizing. It's a big deal in our culture.
Fantastic. So I have two more questions. Okay, the first is kind of linked to what you just said. What did you learn from your grandmother that you have carried on with you as a human, as you know, as a person, as a writer?
I would say everything. My grandmother is I lived, you know, imagine growing up under the shadow of this fierce, brave, who, like my grandmother was in constant fight with lions, other clan, and her no good husband. Her second husband, I heard, she literally will insult him because rumor has it, and some of my cousins will not like it, because this is a man she married after my grandfather died, right? You were kind of pushed or forced or encouraged to marry that man's brother. So it's not a man she chose to marry or would have married, you know. But now they are husband and wife, and who knows, maybe she was his second wife. But she found him to be a bit greedy, and you know, and she's a poet, so she will what she did was she composed this intricate, complex poem insulting him, and he could be sitting there not knowing that this poem is for him. So in this poem I heard she said, "Hoye qorqora wuu qayliyaa, intuu qayliyaabuu qaraxtamaa, naarida qalow qari buu yiri, naaqiiqiyo bixin buu yiri." So what this same poem is saying is, qorqora is kind of a name she chose to call him while he's living in, like, with him. And what she was telling him was, he's so stingy. He tells me to slaughter the goat, and he tells me, make sure no smoke. Right in the desert, what do people watch? Whenever you see a smoke that's you know, coming out somewhere, you know, like not like here we go, oh, fire, but here they go, someone is slaughtering something, somebody's cooking. It kind of gives you the feeling. But he's telling me to hide the smoke. He's telling me to put the lobes of meat to a corner to hide it. Like, what are you? So from what I heard, the family doesn't want to release the rest of the poem. My mom's brothers and sisters, but also her cousins. So that is my witty, smart. So living under the shadow of that grandmother, I really was one of those kids, a lot of times very brave, always doing things that just out of character, and you know, it felt like there's nothing, the sky was the limit for me. And really, that really helped, like forming me the woman I will become later. Resilient, adaptability, gritness, right? Resilience, adaptability, gritness, and you know, ability to love you, who you are, your skin, everything about you. And you know, I mean, ability to know that I can do things and overcome hardship and everything that's thrown. By the end of the day, genetically, I come from this strong woman. Yeah, I love her, and I still think about her. she's still with me, my grandmother.
Yeah, what a remarkable character.
Amazing.
So I'm just going to ask you one final question. This book is very layered, and it has a lot. It's really, really packed with a lot of beautiful things. There's this very, very graphic section where you talk about the female genital mutilation. That was really disturbing, but it was necessary.
And it's written in a way that's with honesty and relatable and make you understand. I was going on something when I wrote about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all of that, and then the aftermath of the war.
Yeah.
As after the war broke out, and how did you even survive? What kept you going? During
the war.
Yeah, during the war.
Somali war happened when I am I'm trying to guess, because we never celebrated birthday. Writing this book, it wasn't like, it was around my birthday. I wasn't doing it, more like whatever event that was happening. So I think I was probably maybe 16 or 15. And one thing it's interesting about when you're young, teenagers feel invisible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I felt I was for one in that invisible stage, and then, like I said, with all of this thing, like I survived orphanage, I survived females, I survived all of this thing by the time the war came along. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough that I have my family to travel with, Yes, it was we as on the way to Kenya, we got attacked by lions. And the place was filled with angry baboons. It was just like snakes, you name it. In fact, the road we took, they call it, Somalis call Habarwal. It means you only take this road if your parent course you. You were like, go ahead and take it. It's the road we took to Kenya. So yeah, it was tough time. I almost get raped. There's nothing that didn't happen to me. But at the same time, when I'm telling this story, a lot of people who read, my friends have been all texting, Shukri, wow, this book, wow, I didn't know it was this good. Wow, that's what my friend would all sending me. And I think because I was able to write this story with such a humanness in it, I did not want to kill this kind of, I like to joke around a little bit when I was talking about the camel male coming in heat who was aroused by my red dress and all that. I think I tell it with a little bit of humor, and I'm not saying, like, even when I was Samuel writing about the female circumcision, I was writing not like a lot of people. I read the book, it was always from like, I am the victim of it. What I really wanted to show you is the mindset, right? That get us there. We shaming 2-year-old girls for having this bodily clitoris or whatever. Like, we're shaming our womanhood. And by the time you are in age 5 or 6, you are sick of it. You want to join this rank of what they call good girl, right? Yeah. And what you don't understand is that it is like, it's, if my grandmother did not do that, no one, she knew I would not get married, or I will be forever shunned. I will be, what is the word I'm looking? Is it shunned?
Shunned, and you can be a pariah.
Like isolated, ridiculed, bullied. All of this would have happened to me. And I think my grandmother knew the responsibility fall on her after my mother passed away, and she knew she had to do that. And so I actually also, when I wrote, I literally described the birds above me, the smell of the trees I was, and the way I told it is actually in a way that somebody's like, are you trying to write me this beautiful story? It's more like from my point of view.
Yeah.
Just showing to you as a child what I was saying. I didn't say, oh, they did this to me. I'm more like, let me take you to my world, and here is what was happening to be that book.
Fantastic. And that was what you did.
Throughout, I go back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throughout, I said, okay, now I am getting this thing undone. Now, in the end, now my daughters are not going to have. So all of that is just...
fantastic. And that was what you did throughout the book. You took us on this journey, took us into your world. And it was,
I really want you to know that whenever you're reading, we're having tea. I'm there with you.
Thank you.
You were there with me, Shugri, telling me a story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this beautiful book, for this wonderful book. I want to encourage you, the people watching, to get this book. This is amazing. This is something else. We want to give the opportunity for people to ask questions. Maybe we can take.
And I am seeing the comments. People are so sweet. The voice of African must tell. Oh, absolutely. We tell our own story.
Yeah.
That's so kind. Somebody say laugh out loud. Yes, we can laugh out loud. What a beautiful. I'm glad they can understand my voice. I wasn't sure. Like, I'm not sure what's going on with my throat.
Oh,
of COVID or something. Yeah.
So I think we can take two questions. Do we have any question here? Okay. So, let me just ask one final question, just to wrap the whole thing up.
Okay.
We bring.
That's okay. I mean, we're okay.
So
I'm looking at the comments finally. Absolutely. Yeah, people are so kind.
Okay. Oh, so there's a question here. How have your children reacted to the book?
Really differently. My oldest daughter, I don't know if I have her letter. She wrote me a letter. She's the writer in the family. She's the poet. She's the linguist. So she's a really smart young lady. So she had a hard time initially reading. So she read it in segment. And finally, when the book was coming out, she pulled it all together and read it and wrote me a beautiful letter. Just, being proud. And really, one of the things she said, Mom, she had a hard time knowing that, like, there's this deep longing for her grandmother, which is my mother in this case, right? And she felt like she missed out, Imagine if I did not grow up under the shadow or the amazing woman, like, would Shugri be Shugri today? Who knows, right? Like, so she knows she missed out something, and it really bothers her. But I kind of remind her, like, my daughter is a linguist, like my father. She's tough and resilient, like my grandmother. She literally self-taught herself Swedish of all language.
Oh, wow.
My son, amazing Sammy, I call him a Sammy boy, is the one that often makes sure that I don't feel good about my parenthood. He challenges me a lot. Because the girls are, for me, at least easier, but for him, I have. And what I remember one time when I was writing this, so somebody was reading, a friend and I were reading the chapter about the female circumcision. He's like, what are you talking about, Mom? What's going on? Like, what? They did that to you? Like, he was really,
oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, like he's like, this cannot be. He couldn't fathom it. I said, what? They did that to you? He really had a hard time processing, and I can see him short-circuiting of this happened to my mom, but I come from this woman. She gave birth to. What's going on? And his world was very fragile, and I actually didn't know what to say, and I took my time, and it almost like it felt like they did, like he's gonna go to war with somebody, so I have to like say, oh yeah, and it happens to all the women in Somalia that I like.
Wow.
Wow. So my youngest one is 14, Sabina. We think she's gonna be the tallest one in the family. Very kind child, kindest child I have ever met. So kind, always catering to everybody. Mom, headache here, but everybody is like, she just, even if her brother is mean to her, she said, would you like a water? I'm like, no, don't give him water. He was not nice to you. Like, So that is my Sabina, and she hasn't read. She read here and there. I think she's gonna wait for the um there is this book is gonna there's a book called Young Adult or Young Reader that's gonna come
wow.
up. Yeah, so maybe she can um she could probably read. She's going to high school, so she could probably read this one. However, because I'm her mother, I'm not ready of her reading the female circumcision. If it's another child, it's okay, because that child, I'm not his mother. Children, it's very hard for children to see their mother experiencing pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been. Thanks for asking. Yeah, my husband read it too. He loved it, and of course, he will be sleeping at night reading the book and say, "Honey, that happened." It's like when you have the author in bed with you, there is something else.
Fantastic. Last question. Final question.
Okay. By the way, wonderful. People are just amazing with their kind words. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's a question here. How do you navigate the three cultures in your family? You have the Somalian culture, you have the Ethiopian culture, and then the American culture.
Californian culture, like, yeah, you just
California.
blend them all together and you make a beautiful thing. And one thing that really that I do is I'm one of those friends who can cook for a lot of people. So when I'm cooking for my friends, one event I had a friend who had a breast cancer, and I was cooking for her 40th birthday, I remember. So when I'm cooking, I'm using Somali spices, Ethiopian spices, and American spices like onion and curry. And is actually, imagine, that is the beauty of when we share cultures. Something even more beautiful. It's the idea of accepting each other, right, Samuel? Like, I'm always open to people of different cultures, and I believe they can only enrich my life and make it better. And hearing your stories, Samuel, the other day when we talked, it enriches me further. Hearing everybody's, I often wanted to ask people. So that is a very good question. And I think I am just so happy to be part of. It's funny because the Somalis of that Somalia now, when we go there, they know we are strange creatures, right? They look at me as you guys from the diaspora, because what happened is because we all the Somalis who are scattered to the wind, right? Like, we have Somalis living in Denmark. In fact, recently, a guy from, I'm writing a quick essay about a runner for Denmark was a Somali guy. He took the silver place, very proud of him. And the third was another Somali. But we are scattered to the wind. So what happened is this, going back home to Somalia, all of these people from Denmark, from Holland, from Sweden, from America, all going, and we are all carrying a culture of the country we live, right? Yeah. So, like, they recognize us. So we are a bit denatured, to put it chemistry term, but it's a beautiful thing that comes up. I'm happy to be among my Californian hippie friends who often threaten to eat their goats. Okay.
Yeah, and there are sections in the book about that too. Are you planning another book?
Oh, honestly, yes, Samuel. What happened was, I'm now worried, like, because I was like, okay, I'm going to finish this and I'm going to write some, but I'm going to go back to my nursing job because, like, I love nursing. I love being a nurse as well. But it looks like something open up and hurdle open up. And I have an amazing agent too. My amazing agent, Jillian McKenzie, is, I don't know. I think this woman, we're sisters from another mom, right? Like, she's just amazing. And she has all this project for me. And I am thinking, I have so much stories to tell, you know? And I want to really tell all of these amazing stories. And so there is this book that is The Last Nomad is going to give birth to that book, The Young Adult. Then there is I'm going to start working on a book, picture book about a nomadic young girl, similar kind of my upbringing. That's what and then there is a middle grade book that's about 80% done, and we're gonna sing. there is a book. So all of those are written, and there's another story that I kind of actually wrote about it a little bit. It's maybe 5 essays together about 5 women. It's this story. I really want to see follow up, right? All of the audience may think, okay, this woman went to a Somali woman. There's this feeling you get because we went to female circumcision, we're like kind of like, oh, undone. It's hard to have a conversation after you are admitted to female circumcision. So I'm humanizing. So I'm writing this amazing 5 women, some of them who are married to African Americans, some of them who are married to white Americans, all of this European Americans, all of this Mexican, who knows, like Japanese, right? Really, I've seen even a Japanese and Somali guy, lady married. So what I'm trying to do is capture all of these stories and say, we are more complex than that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Just because we went through female circumcision doesn't mean we are done. And
and this book does a wonderful job of exploring that complexity.
Yeah.
In that way. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh my God, are we done, Samuel? Are we done, Samuel? Like, oh my God.
I think you are done.
I wanted to thank all of these amazing people that has been watching. Thank you so much. And
thank you for watching.
Please, everybody, really, when there is a drought existing for all of those, book vendors, please, like, just help them out. Yeah, like you are helping in. I think for getting from this Kara's books, what you are helping is me as well as the refugee, right? Am I right? The refugee woman. That's an amazing
network.
Yeah, and a lot more thing, and perhaps helping a bookstore do well. I think they're up again. It's a big, companies. So whatever we can do really to support. I'm happy to bring them after a long drought some water in the form of a book. So I got myself 3 books for myself today from a local bookstore, and all that because I'm awakening to all these amazing ways we can help local bookstores, guys. Really, please.
Yes, thank you so much. And we do encourage folks, if you would like to make a direct donation to Refugee Women's Network, that is the most impactful way that you can support them. We would really love for you to consider doing that, and also to learn more about their work in the community, because again, they're so powerful in the metro Atlanta area, and we're so grateful they've been doing this work for so long. You can click the teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy The Last Nomad. And you can keep an eye out for Samuel's book, which will be available for pre-order pretty soon. So
yes, Samuel, I'm gonna get that one.
Yes. So keep an eye out. Join us. Hopefully we can have Samuel back to celebrate with us for his book. And until next time, thank you both so much. This was so lovely. Thank you for your work. This book is beautiful. I hope everybody reads it. I think people of all ages, but I really do hope, mothers and daughters will read it together, because I think it's such a powerful celebration of the women in your family. So this has been really special. So
thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Good night.